So I'll call the the first item, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking for approval of the agenda, and late items.
So moved.
Okay, it's moved by Director Facio and seconded by Director Stobart. Any discussion? Changes, errors, omissions, additions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed if any item carries. I forgot to introduce. We've got a new alternate director at the table this morning. Patty McMahonic is in for Director Orion Engar. So welcome, Patty. Nice to see you. And she's a pretty well-known entity around Chilliwack, but Patty is here. I already said that in place of Director Engar. So welcome. Next item.
3.1, we have the draft Regional and Corporate Services Committee meeting minutes of April 14th, 2022.
Thank you. It's moved by Director Ross and seconded by Director Pranger. Any changes or errors to the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed if any, the item carries. Next item.
4.1 is request for access to records and information under the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. This is an information item, but I am sure staff would be happy to discuss.
Thank you. And we had some correspondence on this item, did we not, Ms. Kinnaman?
We did, yes, that item was circulated. And if you'd like to discuss that item of correspondence now, we certainly can.
Sure. I think it's worthwhile. The directors have seen that correspondences from media personnel and who often takes the time to cover the workings of the Fraser Valley Regional District, and we appreciate that outlet for doing so. But if any directors had any questions or comments on this, this doesn't bind directors to any particular outcome, but if there are any questions, happy to entertain them now. Director Facio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just in regards to the, I fully support the recommendation. I don't think the it's really $10. I think is absolutely nothing, considering the amount of time and research the staff have to take, depending on what comes forward on the FOI. I mean, it works out to $33.91 overall in 20 previously for the staff here. I mean, $10. I mean, anybody. Well, I know it's a difficult job because we go through the same request at the municipal level in Harrison, and I fully support. Personally, I don't think it's enough, $10 for the amount of time that's taken on this. But if that's what it is, it's what it is. And I don't believe that the request will actually go down. I think the way things are in this day and age, that they will continue to increase. And that's a good thing. People want to find out what's freedom of information. That's what it's there for. But I think the cost is very reasonable. I mean, it's the first 3 hours I believe is free. So the $10 is not even covering probably 10 minutes of that. Anyway, that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments from board directors? Director Dickey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious. I really know very little about the whole freedom of information situation. Is this becoming unwieldy for staff, or is this something that's just a very small item?
Through the chair to Director Dickey, I will turn things over to Jamie Van Ness, our corporate officer, but in conversation with her this morning, she let me know that since we've been tracking freedom of information requests since 2011, they have increased 400% to date. So it is becoming an increasing body of work. I don't believe that while the events over the last 2 years has likely resulted in increases in FOI requests for many organizations, I don't think that they are particularly representative of the increase for our organization. But I'll just turn things over to Jamie Van Ness to speak to this item.
Through the chair to Director Dickey. Certainly this work represents a large volume of work undertaken by the Legislative Services Department. It's well within our capacity at this point, but really this memo was brought forward just to highlight that large volume of work that's being done kind of in the background, and just highlighting this to the board and to this committee just for information, just to bring that forward, just to highlight the work that is being done.
So right now, we're not anticipating instituting a fee. Is that correct? You're not asking for a fee at this time.
So the ability for the FERD to charge a $10 non-refundable fee exists in the legislation. We don't need the direction of the board to implement that fee.
Right.
However, should the board, provide direction otherwise, staff would be willing to do that.
Okay. I have a question on, so the 400% increase, are we looking at, it's obviously not like 1 to 4 requests where it's, can you give us an idea roughly?
Yeah, absolutely. So that 400% increase, as Ms. Kinnaman mentioned, we started tracking our FY requests in 2011. We had 11 at that time, and last year we had 55.
So, I guess, and I'll just bring this up because it's a point I think worth making, and it's a valid point that that Mr. Olson made, which was, we want to try and find that balance between ensuring that we provide timely, efficient access to public records, and we're open and transparent. But we also have a whole lot of other work that needs to be done at the regional district. And oftentimes in a regional district of our size, everybody's working multiple roles, trying to do the very best to keep up with all of the other demands on their time. And so that being said, 55 times $10 does sort of seem like the same thing we would put in the coffee fund. It doesn't seem like a whole huge amount of money, but could be a bunch of money to a smaller independent news media outlet who is making requests in multiple jurisdictions, et cetera, et cetera. I know we can't control fees that are imposed in other municipalities, but I'm wondering, because we have this in our back pocket and we have the ability to do so, and if it starts to become unwieldy, we have the ability to do stuff if we need to start recouping a lot of time and energy spent. But we certainly wouldn't want to impose a fee to disincentivize people from having access to open, transparent government. So that's just my commentary, I guess. But Director Horn.
My comments would be similar. And I think when we look at the amount of money we're collecting, it's a $10 surcharge. We're not looking at something that's going to be significant cost recovery. So that begs the question, what is its intention? And I think what it's meant to be is some sort of a speed bump, asking people to take a sober second thought. I think my guess is that the document and application process already does that. At a time when community newspapers are already harder and harder to find and looking for content, and at a time when people, and I think this was really apparent in some of the conversation that was at LMLGA, are very much interested in what's going on in council chambers and in regional district board chambers. I think it's particularly important for us to be as open and transparent as we can. So I know there's no recommendation, but from this director's perspective, the more we are keeping it an open and transparent organization, I think the better the public is served.
Director Ross. And then I see Director Dixon after that.
Yeah, it's kind of a difficult one because I certainly see staff's point of view in charging at least a minimal fee. But on the other hand, we complain all the time that there's very little investigative journalism done these days. Very often it's superficial and they don't really get to the heart of the matter. And so the public isn't fully informed because of that lack of investigative journalism. So for those that are doing that, I'd like to encourage it, and I'd like to do everything I can to help them, dig a little deeper to the issues and have more fulsome reporting. And I don't want to be a barrier to that, I guess. I want to encourage more of that.
Director Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My thoughts are is that I do think that the $10 might cause people to just really think about the validity or how important this is to them. But I have a question around. It says that the average charge was $33 and something. Are people charged a certain amount after the 3 free hours? Is that where the average $33 comes from?
Ms. Kinnaman.
Thank you, Chair Lum. Perhaps Ms. Van Ness would like to speak to how the charges are assessed on the various files.
Through the chair to Director Dixon, in answer to that question, the fees are set out in the legislation, and you're correct. So after the first 3 hours, there is a nominal rate that's applied in terms of searching for the records, reviewing them, etc. And that's where you would get that average of $33 charge, representing time spent over and above the first free 3 hours.
May I have a follow-up, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And typically, do they take longer than 3 hours?
Ms. Van Ness.
Through the chair to Director Dixon, I can advise that so we would have had 5 this year where we haven't had a charge. So indicating that it took less than 3 hours. So typically, I guess, about less than 10%.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Director Dickey.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious, staff, whether there's an ability for you to categorize what type of things are requested, whether they're land use decisions or.
Through the chair to Director Dickey. So the FOI application process is confidential, and I'd rather not break down those categories, but I can tell you that we have received 33 as of the date of the memo, and actually we're up to 37 now.
Ms. Kinnaman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the committee for this discussion on this item. One of the intentions of bringing this item forward too was just to bring you into some of the operational realities that come into play. I think that for many people, when they think about an FOI request, they think that maybe it's just a matter of pulling a report or pulling a document, when in fact, as Ms. Van Ness mentioned, most of them, the majority of them, are more than 3 hours of work, which means that it's more than just her team. So it extends through the entire organization. Anyone that might have touched a file on a particular topic, they have to go through their emails, they have to go through their records, and they have to provide them to Ms. Van Ness and her team, who then have to review each and every one of those records. So depending on the topic and the scope and scale of the request, it can be quite a lot of review time to go through. And that's also in addition to sometimes there's conversations that have to be held with the commissioner. If there are objections to some of the materials that are being presented. So again, an information item, we appreciate the conversation, and it's just to further highlight some of the work that goes on in the day-to-day at the regional district.
Thank you, Ms. Kinnaman, and I don't see any other comments. So we'll move to the next item, but I just like to thank staff for bringing it forward. And certainly it's something that I'd like to obviously continue to see track so we can get some metrics on it. And it's such it's an interesting topic because certainly it's a part of being in a public, in a public sector, and it again a part of our credibility as an organization, how we are able to provide this information in a timely manner back to the public who wishes to see it. But there are also, just as there are a lot of really good actors and investigative, connected constituents who want to, and media outlets who want to get timely access to information, there are also some examples of bad actors who are looking to just play gotcha politics with people and take up a lot of time and energy that at least this director might consider to be not a good use of staff time. So I realize that it's a challenge, and I thank you for bringing it forward and for your hard work and your team's hard work on these items. Next item.
4.2, we have amendments to FVRD Board and Committee Procedures Bylaw number 1600. There is a motion for your consideration.
Thank you. That's moved by Director Pranger, seconded by Director, I see Popov. Yeah, there it is. Discussion. Director Horn.
Just a question through you, Mr. Chair, to staff in terms of when, if the board was to approve this in June, when it would take effect.
Ms. Kinnaman.
Through the chair to Director Horn, it would take effect immediately.
Okay. And any other discussion, questions? No, don't see any. Oh, yeah, Director Ross.
Yeah, while I was reading this, I guess I'm just interested in what some of the other directors think about this, because I know in Abbotsford, yes, we went to our meetings, evening meetings from 7 o'clock to 6 o'clock. That didn't really interfere with dinner issues, making sure we got a meal at dinner, because, you know, the evening meetings tend to be quite short. We can eat after that. We live in the community that where our meetings are, so it's easier to come and go. So I guess I'm just wondering for some of the other directors who have to travel larger distances to get here at 6 o'clock, does that mean that they don't get dinner? So I guess I'm just wondering if that causes an issue for anyone else. I'm fine with 6 o'clock myself, but on those evenings I probably won't eat dinner because I'm not used to eating until 7 o'clock.
Through the chair to Director Ross, certainly staff wanted to bring this forward to have that exact conversation. And I think on the flip side is how late meetings go, and those same directors that have to travel long distances have to drive quite into the late of night. And so I think it's just trying to find that balance. So we haven't received any feedback about the dinner hour at this point.
Comments or questions from any directors, any EA directors? I'm sure, I mean, this is going to come to the full board, so we'll be able to capture any comments or questions back from that. Certainly, Director Dickey, if you hear anything, please let us know, or I'm sure we'll hear about it. Let me know if I'm going to have to start making dinner for the board. That was outside of my job description. Okay, no more. Oh, Director Pranger.
I only live a half an hour away, so it's immaterial for me whether it's 6 or 7. But if it makes it easier for those that are in, for example, Boston Bar or Mission, then I'm okay with it either way.
Okay, Director Facio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I fully agree with the 6 o'clock. Really, besides the directors, the staff are probably here from, I don't know, maybe 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning on time. The in cameras are finished and everything else is probably rolling out of here sometimes 11 o'clock at night, if we like it was at the last board meeting. It was a long one, but it was a late one. So 6 o'clock actually is changing my mind towards my area, to be perfectly honest as well. The 6 o'clock, I think personally that hour would make a lot of difference. And now with the other avenues that the public have with the social media, Zooms and everything else, they can just watch everything from home while they're eating their supper. So it doesn't interrupt them really. So personally, I think it's a good move and I would fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Facio. Don't see any other comments, so call the question. All in favor? Opposed if any? Item carries. Next item.
Next is 5.1.1. It's an information item about the floodwater mosquito season preparedness. I'm sure staff would be happy to discuss.
I'm sure they would. Any questions on this report? Director Ross?
A question, just my thanks for doing a little research and getting on top of this and, you know, anticipating what might happen and being prepared. So thanks.
It's not on this topic, but would note that I believe it's invasive species month this month, is it not? Perhaps it isn't. Maybe I'm totally wrong, but I heard it was invasive species month. As mentioned, that is a topic under environmental services that I know they do a lot of work on in addition to floodwater mosquitoes. So there, just a little plug. And I saw Ms. Barker's face light up. So I think it is invasive species month. In honor of that, I pulled out a whole bunch of Himalayan blackberry yesterday. Don't don't see any other comments. Next item.
Next is 5.2.1, which is BC's Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act Action Plan. Again, an information item, but staff are available for questions.
Thank you. Any questions on this item? Director Horn.
I was very grateful to see this on the agenda. It's been in my mind for a while, and again, second reference to LMLGA conference, but going up there and hearing the work being done by various communities on UNDRIP or DRIPA is powerful. But at the same time, it struck me that we had Indigenous nations, First Nations there in a more ceremonial way or as guest speakers, but not as constituents representing communities. And frankly, I think it's time for the rubber to hit the road and for us to act on this. So I was glad to see that the conversation about First Nations being a part of regional districts was part of what the action plan incorporates. And certainly we would not be the first. Other regional districts are already doing this. So my question to the chair and staff is, if we wanted to begin the process of looking at how we might invite or at least investigate the possibility of that, how would staff have staff thought about how we might begin that process and what it might look like, as well as when we might be wise to time it in terms of the workload that staff have, if there's board support?
Sure, through the chair to Director Horn. This has been an ongoing topic of conversation with staff for sure. I think that through our last strategic plan process, we talked about Indigenous relations and relationship building as one of our priorities. And my hope would be that with the next board term that we would dig into that a little bit deeper, particularly now that this action plan is available, so that we can get some very specific direction from the board in terms of what they would like to see and what ideas they have around that. Staff will be bringing forward some suggestions as well in that regard, but we're always happy to receive other direction from the committee or board at this point.
Follow up, Mr. Chair, if I can. That's great news. And in terms of timing, it strikes me that it is the correct timing for those of us who will be back here, hopefully in the fall. But the one question I would ask, and I don't know if staff have already done some of this work, is just inquiring as to how the onboarding has happened in other regional districts in terms of process they've used there. I know each region has got a different, we'll call it culture, I suppose, or atmosphere. But I'm hoping that if we're, for those of us who are privileged to be a part of that next strategic planning, we'll have that information at the ready when the time comes and have an understanding of what's feasible and have what timelines may be realistic. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Through the chair to Director Horn. As a matter of fact, the legislative services team and I have been talking about what that onboarding is going to look like for the new board. And in particular for making sure that those who have been on the board for a long time participate even at that early stage, because I think that many of these topics are refresher items and thinking about innovative ways that we can make that onboarding process engaging and building this new team for the 2022 to 2026 board term.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, what I meant by onboarding there, and I shouldn't have used the term that way, is what others have done in other regional districts to build those, to onboard First Nations, to bring them in as potential members.
Sure. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Director Horn. Other questions or comments? Just take an opportunity to thank staff for this report as well. This has been an item where, to be honest, I've been kind of waiting to see some indication or some kind of solid direction out of the province, and to see, it's one thing to have kind of an ad hoc process across the province for regional districts, and another thing if the province who brought in this legislation had somewhat of a structure or a framework or an idea of how they envision this going, instead of waiting for regional districts to figure the process out, and then they come up with their own process, and then we're left kind of struggling figuring out who's we're going to follow. I had the opportunity to have a bit of a conversation with Minister Cullen about, some of his ideas. He's very, very passionate about this subject, but it's one thing to just say we want to have that participation, but there's a lot of considerations right now. The votes and the directors around this table are assigned by population, and they're assigned, we have these neat electoral area boundaries and municipal boundaries and easy ways to kind of assign directors. And it's not always the case in the different First Nation communities that are represented within the regional district. And so, and it's not also always the case if you're sitting at this table as a voting, weighted vote board member, and apparently or readily easy to say, okay, this is exactly how we will assign those weighted votes. And so I think we do need the province to kind of step in and start to articulate what they see in terms of the vision for having that participation around the board. Certainly, there are a lot of things that regional districts can do to pave the way, build the foundation for when and if that day should come. And I think the writing on the wall is that, we're in this together. We're going to work together, and we want to work together. But there's some nuts and bolts that need to be figured out. And I think it was maybe Alberni Clackwat that has members on the regional district. I know their chair, John Jack, is also counselor with the Hawaiian First Nation. And it might be a good check-in to check in with Alberni Clackwat and say, how did this all work out? I know there was that's a Treaty First Nation. There was some neat work that was done in preparation for some of those directors to move to the board. And I think a lot of that is available, or they would make it readily available. And I've had conversations with Chair Jack about that in the past. So that's a good idea. See how have others done this before us. Director Dickey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just would like to say that I'd be very supportive of the chair's position on this issue. This is going to be a very big issue in local government. And when you look at the Fraser Valley Regional District's makeup with the number of First Nations groups we have in our communities, it's certainly very important that we get this right. We don't go charging in before the ground rules are well understood. And I would be cautious about going forward. We certainly want to encourage First Nations groups to become a bigger part of our governance, but we want to make sure we get this right.
Thanks, Director Dickey. Director Stobart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I agree as well. That maybe not caution, but certainly we've got to go in with eyes wide open. And I think the worst thing we could do is go too fast and end up with something that wasn't meaningful for First Nations. And I think, and again, as with the scope and size, when you have bands with 10 members and others with 1,000, the capacity is certainly going to be an issue throughout. So there's a lot to be considered. And again, I think inviting people into something that had no real meaning for them would set us back quite a bit. So I certainly agree to, we need the province to step up to maybe alter some legislation we can't do things that are illegal, or at least, we shouldn't be. So I'm hoping in the next while that we do move ahead, but we're going to need some support from the province before we can do this properly, I believe.
And importantly, First Nation communities have to have a good opportunity to articulate how they wish to be identified and how they wish to be represented and how they wish to represent themselves in this other governance, which is not the same as the governance roles that they establish for their own independent governance and independent governments. So that's going to be key as well. And their decision making and how they wish to represent and be represented. I don't see any other
I see
comments.
Director Blue actually.
Oh,
has
sorry,
hand
Director
raised.
Blue
Yeah.
online.
No worries, thank you. Yeah, I agree with the comments that have just been made. I think there's a few things in terms of the weighted vote that you spoke about, Mr. Chair, but also setting the expectations, I think is really important. The role of the regional districts is a very specific role that we all well understand, but it's very different, as has been stated, from the nation to nation dealings or dealing with the various councils within their own regions, First Nations councils. So I think that really having the province, assist with what they see as the scope and how this might all work, I think is really critically important for us to get it right, or it will seem, or could potentially seem either insincere, inauthentic, or just out of alignment. And it might actually discourage the very participation that we're seeking to have. Thank you.
Great comments, Director Blue. Okay, I don't see anyone else online and don't see anyone here. So next item.
Next is 6.1. We have interim flood support, province of British Columbia. There is a motion for your consideration.
Thank you.
So moved.
Moved by Director Facio, seconded by Director Dickey. And comments, questions? I don't see any, but just this was a pleasant surprise. We got this letter, and certainly is a good start. And we look forward to many more of these types of letters coming to the regional district. I just wanted to clarify with staff that because our emergency function is within the electoral area directors, this will go to electoral area projects.
Through the chair,
With service areas.
to the chair,
Sorry, with the service areas.
to service areas. That's
right.
correct. And staff will be going through the long list of recovery projects. It is possible that there could be recovery projects related to regional parks that would benefit from these dollars, but we would be looking to find where we're going to get the best bang for our buck, for example. Also, the intention of these funds is to be used where other programs are not available. So if we are going to be receiving funding through our DFA application, and that would meet the needs, we would certainly apply those funds first. And as I said, best bang for our buck.
I guess my intent in that question is identifying that in addition to these funds that the Fraser Valley Regional District received, I noted many municipalities were on that list and also received funding from the province of British Columbia. And not that we ever do this, but there wouldn't be sort of double dipping. We would be able to utilize these funds in the regional district for regional district projects. Thank you. Director Prager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I would like to thank everybody around the table for the advocacy that was put forward from all of the areas with the province. And I think it's also a recognition by the province that municipalities and regional districts, especially electoral areas, can't fund these projects on their own. And I take heart that maybe this is a first step in a longer process where funding will be coming forward for the many, many projects that require our attention.
Well, Director Pranger, as you were somebody who has long time led the charge on the importance around flooding, long before my time on this board. And so I think you're being pretty modest, and not recognizing how much work you've put into this. And I know the first three resolutions to come forward at this year's Lower Mainland Local Government Conference were sponsored or brought forward by the Fraser Valley Regional District, and all were passed unanimously. And I think that's a good indication, not only that of the advocacy work that this board is doing, but also that the rest of of the region, the 2 additional regional districts, and all of the communities represented also believe in the work of the Fraser Valley Regional District and the advocacy work. So we also saw some regulation changes that were announced last week around, I believe were in part an answer to some of the challenges that we brought up with changing the 80-20 model and giving local, especially local service areas and electoral areas, at least a fighting chance when it comes to being able to tackle some of these big capital projects that need to be undertaken. So always some baby steps in the right direction, but we will not let our foot off the gas pedal yet. No other comments on this. I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? The item carries. Next item.
6.2 is Union of British Columbia Municipalities Province as Authority for Orphan Dykes. There is a motion for your consideration.
Thank you. It's moved by Director Stobart and seconded by Director Horn. And comments, questions? I know Director Horn, this was another one that you've advocated very strongly for, and really appreciate that. And we will continue that advocacy on the big stage at the UBCM in September. Looking forward to it. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a key one, and I think I just want to give notice that I think we'll probably have to have a similar discussion about Hatzick Lake, and Director Davidson and I will be connecting. I think we'll have some further advocacy around some the way infrastructure ages, and sometimes governance bodies age as well and need to be kept current, because they're all residues of old ways of doing things. So anticipate that we'll perhaps be talking about that as well.
Good comments. Seem to make sense back in the 1960s, and when these projects weren't in the multi-millions of dollars, and the local farmers still had a bit of capacity to help out, but certainly not the case these days. Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed, if any? The item carries. Next item.
Moving down to reports by directors, item 9.
Thank you. Directors, be your opportunity. Don't see any. Just take an opportunity to thank everybody all the directors who had who took part in the Lower Mainland LGA, and hopefully the the director to my left tells you all about some exciting things that happened there. Namely, she got elected as president. But if she doesn't, there you go. Director Pranger.
Might I say by acclamation, no election required.
That's right.
So that tells you something about the quality of the new president. Thank you very much.
We are very lucky to have Director Ross as the new president of the Lower Mainland LGA. Director Pranger.
We have a big fundraiser in the district of Kent this weekend, Saturday from 3 to midnight, to help raise funds for our new aquatic center, which we hope we can pay for with some additional fundraising. We are grateful for the grant that we received, but the work's only just beginning. So help us get the work done. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Pranger. Don't see anyone online. So next item.
Next item is public question period for items relevant to the agenda. And we'll just turn things over to Jamie Van Ness.
Miss Van Ness.
So we don't have anybody joining us in person today, and we do not have anybody joining us on the Zoom call. However, we have received one item of correspondence that was highlighted previously with respect to item 4.1. But there was a question. I won't read out the whole email, but there was a question on this email that was received. And that question was, do you wish to deter people from submitting requests for public documents?
Thank you, Ms. Van Ness. And I think that question was sufficiently answered in the discussion, that the robust discussion that the directors had during that item. And if the person who wrote that correspondence doesn't feel that that was such, I'm sure we will hear from it. Next item.
Next item is a resolution to close the meeting.
So moved.
Thank you. It's moved by Director Facio, seconded by Director Dickey. All in favor, opposed, if any, the item carries.
Just give us a couple of minutes to set up the room.